The SEALs had already started goodbye. The canyon was too tight, the enemy too entrenched, and the sky above them far too lethal for any aircraft to survive. Their last radio message was brief. "We'll hold as long as we can. If you're hearing this, tell our families we fought." In the command tent miles away, no one argued. Pilots refused the route. Drones couldn't even see inside. Not a single soul believed air support was possible. Except one. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't wait for backup. And when her A-10 engine roared to life, even the ground crews stopped what they were doing to watch. Because everyone knew, once she took the sky, something was about to change. Not just in that canyon, but in the history of what one pilot could do alone. You're watching the Storyscape, where we bring you the untold legends of silent heroes, pilots, medics, warriors who changed everything when no one was watching. If this story finds you, it's for a reason. So wherever you're watching from, home, work, or somewhere in between, lean in, because what you're about to hear isn't just about war. It's about one woman, one aircraft, and the moment she turned an entire battlefield upside down. The radio transmission was only 8 seconds long, but it brought the entire operations tent to a standstill. Bravo 6 to command. Pinned, high ground occupied, ammo low, do not attempt extraction. This is our last stand. Static swallowed the rest. Major Elaine Kitts stood quietly near the back, arms crossed, her flight suit dusted from the hangar. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at the green glow monitor as if willing it to come back to life. But the screen remained blank. No signal, no blip, just silence. Captain Mason, one of the SEAL team's liaisons, leaned forward across the ops table. That canyon's a death trap. Even a drone won't make it in. Around him, officers and analysts traded helpless glances. The maps were already marked. Terrain elevation, brutal. Crosswinds, unpredictable. Radar, blind in most sectors. The valley was a snaking trench of rock and shadow buried deep inside the Korangal Mountains, nicknamed by locals as the Devil's Mouth. Lieutenant Colonel Harrow stepped forward. "We wait until nightfall. If they're still breathing, we go in with Blackhawks under low moon." Everyone knew that would be too late. The enemy controlled the peaks, armed with RPGs, heat-seeking launchers, and eyes trained on every path in and out. Bravo 6 had stumbled into a perfect ambush, and now, surrounded on all sides, their fate was just a matter of time.
Someone whispered it aloud. "Even the SEALs are saying goodbye." That was when Elaine stepped forward. "No," she said, loud enough to silence the tent. "We're not waiting." Harrow turned. "Excuse me?" She didn't flinch. "I've flown that canyon before, during Operation Gatefire. I know where the thermals break. I know how to ride the wind between those rock faces." "Major Kit," he said slowly, "you're proposing low-altitude CAS in a dead zone." "Yes, sir." "You'd be flying blind." "Not blind," she said, "just below everyone else." There were a few scoffs in the room. One of the drone techs muttered, "She's not serious." Another whispered, "That place chews up aircraft." But Elaine didn't respond. Her eyes never left the map. "If I go in under the ridgeline and hug the southern wall, I can follow the shadows, use the turbulence to my advantage. Stay fast, stay low, don't give them time to blink." Harrow shook his head. "You'd have to fly under 200 feet just to enter. That's below safety threshold. If you clip a wing, I won't. We lose the aircraft. Understood. We lose you. I know the risk." He stared at her for a long moment. "Why now?" She pointed to the canyon. "Because they're not gone yet. And if someone doesn't give them cover, That last stand becomes a massacre. A silence fell over the room. Tactical screens flickered. Someone coughed. A pen dropped. Then, softly, Captain Mason said, "You really think you can pull this off?" Elaine turned to him. "I don't think, Captain. I know." 20 minutes later, Hangar Bay 3 roared to life. Her aircraft, an A-10C Thunderbolt II, was already prepped. Ground crew scrambled to load armor-piercing rounds, reset hydraulic systems, and double-check flare systems. The Warthog, affectionately nicknamed Ripjaw by its crew, was built for survival, for flying slow, hitting hard, and coming home ugly. But today, Elaine wasn't just flying ugly. She was flying impossible. A young crew chief jogged to her side as she zipped her gloves. "Ma'am, wait." She turned. He held out a patch, handmade, black thread on gray canvas, the shape of a storm cloud with bolts slicing downward. It read simply, "Storm Caller." She smiled faintly. "Didn't think anyone remembered that." "We remember everything, ma'am, especially Kunur Pass." She nodded once and slipped the patch into her sleeve. Then she climbed the ladder into her cockpit. Inside, everything was calm. The kind of calm that comes just before the sky tears itself open. Her hands moved automatically. Flaps, trims, throttle checks.
The muscle memory took over, quieting the nerves. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the tarmac. Her HUD blinked green, all systems functional. The cockpit felt like a second skin. She exhaled once, then radioed, "Talon Control, this is Stormcaller 1, requesting immediate wheels up on Vector 210. The response came without delay. "Stormcaller 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Godspeed." She pushed the throttles forward. The twin engines screamed to life. Tires screeched. The Warthog surged forward like it was chasing something ancient. As she lifted off the runway, the entire airfield seemed to hold its breath. One tech whispered under his breath, "There she goes." "Where no one comes back from," another replied. But Elaine Kitt wasn't listening. She was already climbing, already scanning the range, already narrowing her mind into one single thought. 12 lives, one way in, no margin for error. She angled the nose of her bird toward the Korangal peaks. The storm was coming, and this time, it had wings. Long before the world called her Stormcaller, before she earned her place among the ghosts of combat aviation, Elaine Kitt was just a name on a long list of applicants at Laughlin Air Force Base. She had no legacy, no famous lineage, no letters of recommendation from generals or senators. Just a pilot's license, a relentless focus, and a silence about her that made the instructors uncomfortable. The first time she stepped into a T-6 Texan II trainer, the flight chief made a note in his logbook. "Too quiet. Watch closely." They mistook her stillness for doubt, but Elaine wasn't unsure. She was listening to the aircraft, to the weather, to the spaces between noise where instincts lived. By her third solo flight, she was already memorizing wind shear patterns and calculating crosswind limits in her head without touching a pen. She didn't speak unless she had to. She didn't argue. She simply flew. It was after her first A-10 orientation flight that everything changed. The instructors had warned her, the Warthog is not graceful. It's a flying tank. But when she touched the controls, something clicked. While other pilots wrestled with its bulk,
Elaine moved with it like she was born to. She didn't try to dominate the beast. She adapted to it. It responded like it understood. One of the veteran instructors, a colonel who rarely gave praise, muttered after her sim test, "She flies like the sky owes her something." No one knew exactly what that meant, but they all remembered it.
Her call sign came later, Stormcaller, after the joint training mission over the southern Ounce. That day, a surprise pressure shift had caused a cold front to crash head-on with a heat wave from the basin. Visibility vanished. A blizzard erupted out of nowhere, grounding half the fleet. 2 A-10s had already turned back, and a third disappeared off radar. But Elaine didn't abort. She dropped beneath the storm cell, navigating the twisted ravines of the southern range using nothing but manual controls and flashes of terrain between lightning strikes. She didn't just return, she guided 2 others home with her. The control tower's audio logs recorded the moment she emerged from the squall line and radioed, calm as ever. "Stormcaller reporting, 2 in tow. You might want to shovel the runway." The name stuck. But call signs are earned more than once, and her true reputation wasn't forged in training ops. It was earned in fire. Her first combat sortie in Kandahar ended with her Warthog limping back to base with 2 hydraulic failures, no flares, and half her fuselage peppered with shrapnel. But she made it, and she did so without losing a single infantryman on the ground. Afterward, when asked how she managed to stay in the air, she simply replied, "I knew I hadn't finished yet." In the years that followed, Stormcaller became a name people said with a mix of awe and unease. She wasn't reckless, she didn't showboat, but she also didn't back down. Not when the terrain looked impossible, not when the heat signatures got too close, not even when protocol suggested otherwise. She studied every valley like a surgeon studies anatomy. She memorized the ripple patterns of smoke columns and could distinguish between a decoy fire and a real artillery flare just by the color shift in infrared. She didn't fit in with the politics of the Air Force. She never chased promotions or medals. And while others climbed ladders, she remained in the cockpit, choosing hours in the sky over hours in briefings. That made some in command uncomfortable. Pilots weren't supposed to be legends. They were supposed to be manageable. But the field crews, the infantry units, the medics waiting for air cover in the worst places on Earth, they knew better. They started calling her something else, something not written in any logbook. The last pilot you want behind you, and the first you want above you. That day at base, when Bravo 6's final transmission crackled through the speakers, Elaine had already sensed the weight of what was coming. It wasn't bravado that made her volunteer. It was something quieter, deeper.
She remembered those missions where she needed cover, and none came. The calls unanswered. The moments where survival wasn't about luck, it was about someone choosing to go beyond what the rulebook allowed. This was her turn, her responsibility, her flight. By the time the base tower lost her radar signal, by the time her Warthog dipped beneath the peaks and vanished into the canyons, there wasn't a soul in the hangar who doubted why she'd gone. They knew her story. They knew the name. And now, once again, the storm was coming, with a vengeance. The first sign that she'd truly left safety behind wasn't the turbulence or the drop in altitude. It was the silence. The moment Major Elaine Kitt dipped her A-10 beneath the radar line, the comms began to crackle, then fade. The world outside shrank. There were no voices, no updates from command, no chatter from the tower, just the hum of the engines and the growing roar of wind as it funneled through the jagged walls of the canyon ahead. She had entered what pilots called the maw, a deep-cut trench of earth that twisted like a serpent and spat out most things that dared enter. The official designation was Karangaw Sector Zulu, but to those who had tried flying it before and failed, it was simply the trap. Elaine leveled the Warthog just above the ridgeline, her fingers feather light on the throttle. The trees below looked like blades of grass.
the valley's temperature spiked nearly 10 degrees. Thermal updrafts slammed into her fuselage like invisible fists. Her HUD flickered briefly. Altimeter reads 142 feet. Not low enough. She dropped another 15, riding the pressure zones like currents in a stormy sea. Every nerve in her body was tuned to the environment. Subtle shifts in sound, flickers of shadow along the rocks, sudden gusts that could flip her if she wasn't watching for them. She wasn't flying a route, she was threading a needle through a minefield made of air. Somewhere ahead, Bravo 6 was still alive, or what was left of them. Their last known coordinates sat along a southern bend in the valley near a shallow creek bed that had long since dried out into dust. She scanned the ridgelines above for movement, and sure enough, they were crawling. Heat signatures, bodies in motion, enemy fighters positioning along the cliffs. She counted at least 12, possibly more. RPGs, at least 2 man-pads, and they hadn't seen her yet. That was her only advantage. She took a long breath, not out of fear, but to calm her heart rate. Low-altitude flying was already dangerous. Doing it while engaging in combat was a calculated death wish.
But she'd trained for this. She'd rehearsed scenarios others refused to even simulate. She hadn't come to hover. She'd come to end it. With her left hand, she flipped the cannon safety to live. GAU-8, Avenger, 30 millimeters, 3,900 rounds per minute. The weapon wasn't just powerful, it was surgical in the hands of someone who knew what they were doing. Elaine didn't pull the trigger yet. Timing was everything. She was close, but not close enough. The ridge needed to open, the targets needed to commit. She throttled down slightly, letting the Warthog drift into a steeper descent. 117 feet. Her proximity alarm blinked red, then cut out. She didn't need it. At this altitude, you didn't fly by sensors, you flew by feel. Suddenly, a voice broke through the static. Broken, distant. "Caller, do you copy? This is Echo. Heavy fire, northeast ridge. Can't move." She keyed the mic. "Stormcaller to Echo. Say again. Confirm your position." "South Gully, dug in. Incoming from both sides. RPGs above. Need cover, now." That was all she needed. Elaine pushed the throttle forward and banked hard right through the canyon. Her left wing passed within 20 feet of the rock face. Her vision narrowed into a tunnel. Adrenaline kicked in. She let the Warthog fall another 10 feet. Altitude, 102. Speed, 310 knots. The North Ridge came into view, and so did the muzzle flashes. Dozens. Bright, hot, chaotic. The Taliban fighters had no idea she was this low. No time to run. No time to blink. She squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 barked like thunder from hell. The sound echoed across the canyon like the voice of the gods. Concrete bunkers shattered. Smoke erupted. Bodies vanished into debris. The lead RPG team was vaporized before the rocket even left the tube. A second group scattered, but they were too exposed. She walked the fire across the line, tearing through sandbags, makeshift shelters, and anything standing between Echo Team and a chance to live. "Splash, North Ridge," she radioed, eyes locked forward. A cheer broke through the comms. "We see you! Holy hell, we see you!" But she wasn't done. Movement to the west, 2 technicals in motion, trucks with mounted guns, bouncing across a ridge trail, clearly preparing to intercept anyone escaping south. Elaine adjusted flaps manually and dove again, taking a line just above the valley floor. The treetops brushed her belly. She angled toward the vehicles and fired another burst. The lead truck flipped, exploded. The second swerved into a boulder, rupturing into a fireball. Then, silence. The valley was still. She could hear her own breath inside the cockpit, a strange stillness after the chaos. Her fingers hovered above the controls, still anticipating threat, but there was none. Not yet.
Then a new voice came through the radio. "Stormcaller, this is command. Radar shows hostile reinforcements approaching from East Ridge, 2 minutes out. Bravo 6 is on the move, heading south to the LZ. They need 5 minutes of air cover. Can you hold?" Elaine looked at her fuel gauge. It was already below recommended combat threshold. Her flares 60% depleted. The left stabilizer had taken damage from the first pass. Her Warthog was rattling slightly, hydraulics compensating, but struggling. Still, she answered without pause. "Affirmative. I'll hold the line." Then, without ceremony, she turned her aircraft eastward, toward the new threat, toward the incoming swarm of fighters who thought the skies belonged to them. They were about to learn. When Stormcaller was overhead, the sky belonged to her. The eastern ridgeline emerged like a wall of broken teeth, jagged and chaotic, casting long shadows over the canyon floor as the sun dipped lower. Elaine knew the worst wasn't over, it was just changing shape. Reinforcements were coming fast, and with the element of surprise gone, the next few minutes would test every inch of her aircraft and every decision she had ever made as a pilot. She leveled out at just under 95 feet, the lowest she had flown in a live combat zone without night cover. The terrain ahead narrowed into a bottleneck, one way in, one way out, no forgiveness. Her proximity sensors had already failed once. Her HUD flickered intermittently, throwing off altimeter readings. She didn't trust any of it now. She flew by feel, by memory, by instinct. Her headset crackled. "Stormcaller, Echo Team reporting. Moving fast, but we're exposed on the south bank. Repeat, enemy moving in from above." She could almost see it without looking. Troops scrambling to reach the south ridge, looking to cut off the SEALs before extraction. The only way to stop them was to climb, but not up. Down. Elaine dove. The Warthog's engine screamed in protest. G-force compressed her spine as the aircraft dropped like a missile. Trees rushed past like spears. Dust kicked up from the wake of her engines. Her undercarriage brushed the scrub line. Her own voice barely a whisper in her throat. Come on, hold together." She banked right, leveling just above the ground, and caught sight of the south ridge. Fighters were moving into firing position, RPGs shouldered, barrels raised.
She flipped the manual targeting switch, locked eyes on the slope, and fired. The sound of the GAU-8 at this range was deafening, not just noise but impact. Each round a statement that this canyon, this battle, this moment still belonged to her. The ridge shattered. Dust columns rose like smoke from an altar. The enemy line broke, but so did her aircraft. Warning lights flared. Left hydraulic pressure dropped below threshold. Engine temperature spiked past redline. The Warthog rattled hard, like a dying animal refusing to fall. Her hand stayed steady, her jaw clenched. She trimmed the control surfaces manually, compensating for the instability. One wrong twitch, and she'd become part of the valley wall. But she didn't let up. Another sharp turn, another fire burst, and the last RPG crew scattered into the rocks. "South Ridge is clear," she called out, her voice tight with effort. "Copy that, Stormcaller. We're almost at the LZ." Elaine exhaled, briefly. Then her radar, half-functional at best, flashed a new warning. 3 heat signatures moving fast across the eastern slope. One was unmistakable, a man-pad unit, heat-seeking, shoulder-launched, the one weapon she couldn't outfly. Not at this altitude, not with her flare systems drained. She had no options, no time. Unless she made herself too close to lock onto. She slammed the throttle forward and nosed down once again, this time straight at the enemy. The world became a blur of gray and motion. Trees vanished beneath her. Cliff faces rushed past so close she could see the cracks in the stone. She weaved between them like threading a needle at 400 knots. The insurgents froze. By the time they realized what was coming, it was too late. Her cannon barked again,
Short, savage bursts. The man-pad launcher flew backward in pieces, the other scattered, one tumbling down the slope in a roll of limbs and dust. She pulled up hard, too hard. The Warthog groaned, left stabilizer tearing at the seams. Sparks danced from her wing as it clipped a rock ledge. She felt the hit through her bones. The aircraft shuddered, lights flashed, fuel pressure dropped. She checked her gauges, hydraulics failing, left engine sputtering, flaps offline. Still she flew. "Stormcaller, this is command. Do you require assistance?" "Negative," she replied. "Not done yet." Back in the canyon, Bravo 6 broke through the final bend toward the landing zone, a narrow patch of flattened stone marked by smoke grenades and dust. The Chinooks were inbound, ETA 3 minutes. The team needed exactly 180 seconds of clean airspace to reach it alive. Elaine looked at the sky, and then she looked lower, because there was only one way to guarantee they made it. She turned the Warthog back toward the eastern mouth of the canyon, set her course to fly even lower than before, and readied herself for one final pass. She was going to hold the line at the edge of the earth, below the cliff line, below radar, below reason. And if the sky couldn't protect them, then she'd take the ground instead. The dust never settled in that valley. It clung to everything: faces, rifles, boots, lungs. And as Bravo 6 ran for the landing zone, it choked their every breath. The canyon walls towered above like executioners' blades. There was no sky, only fire, and the constant thunder of small arms fire snapping from the rocks above. Corporal Reyes, second in the SEAL team column, glanced up between footfalls. At first, he thought it was just more smoke, more echoes. Then he saw it. A streak, gray, fast, low, too low. He stopped running. "Is that—" Behind him, someone shouted, "Get down!" The air split open. The A-10 came roaring overhead at a height no jet had ever dared. Not in a canyon like this, not with live fire on both sides. The Warthog didn't buzz the ground, it scraped it, its engines howling like some prehistoric beast. To Reyes, it didn't even look like flying. It looked like a machine falling sideways on purpose. And then the cannon opened up. A burst of fury from the GAU-8 Avenger poured into the ridgelines. The roar was so loud it drowned the gunfire. Rocks exploded. Enemy positions disappeared in flashes of dirt and metal. What had been a clean ambush line became a graveyard. Reyes rolled behind a boulder and watched as the aircraft banked left, so sharply that he saw the underside of the wings. One was scorched. The rear stabilizer was blackened. Flaps barely moved. She shouldn't still be flying. She shouldn't even be upright. But she was. Back in the command center, eyes were glued to the few operational sensors still tracking. The radar remained dark, but an infrared camera captured glimpses, flashes of a nose cone, trails of hot air slicing between cliffs, a cannon burst lighting up the rocks like a sun flare. A junior analyst whispered, "She's in the rocks, literally in them." The colonel leaned over the screen. God help her. Back in the canyon, Elaine could feel her aircraft giving out. The left engine was coughing smoke. The fuselage rattled with every maneuver. Warning lights had stopped blinking, some had burned out, but she kept flying. The Chinooks had arrived, thundering low and heavy into the zone. Their massive blades kicked up cyclones of debris. The SEALs sprinted, weaving through rock and ruin, diving into the open holes as bullets chased their heels. Elaine circled overhead, daring anything left in those hills to take a shot. And they did. An RPG launched from the northern slope, a last desperate strike. She saw the smoke trail before the flash, veering up toward the second Chinook. She dove again. Her flares were gone, Her only chance was to fly between the missile and its target. She did. The Warthog screamed downward, passing inches above the treetops. The turbulence from her own jet wash sent the RPG spiraling off course. It detonated in the air, harmless, angry, too slow. "Stormcaller, you just intercepted an RPG with your plane," the pilot in the Chinook shouted. Elaine didn't answer. She was already banking again. From inside the Chinooks, the SEALs watched her pass. For a moment, even the noise faded. There was only awe and disbelief. What they saw wasn't just a pilot. They saw a phantom ripping across the battlefield, dragging steel and smoke behind her, dancing with gravity like it owed her a favor. Her plane was broken, her controls barely functional, but she wasn't slowing down. "Who the hell is that?" one of the rookies asked. The team leader didn't even blink. "That's Stormcaller. You don't ask, you just thank her." On the ground, the enemy began to retreat or disappear. What few fighters remained either ran for cover or lay silent beneath the broken stone. The sky no longer belonged to them. The valley was hers now. Elaine pulled the stick gently, guiding the A-10 into one last, wide circle above the extraction. Her body ached, her eyes stung from the sweat and smoke. The engines coughed again, her fuel light blinked red. "Bravo 6 to Stormcaller, we're secure. Repeat, we are secure." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Copy that. Hold tight. I'll walk you out." Because extraction didn't mean freedom. Not yet. The enemy might have retreated, but the canyon still watched, and danger had a habit of waiting for the last second. As the Chinooks lifted from the rocks, Elaine pushed forward, flying escort at an altitude no doctrine would ever approve. She wasn't just clearing the sky, she was making a statement. To the enemy, to her own command, to every pilot who had ever been told it couldn't be done. Below the cliff line, she had turned her aircraft into a storm.
And the storm wasn't over yet. The Warthog touched down harder than any aircraft was ever meant to. Her tires screamed across the tarmac, one of them nearly giving out on impact. Sparks flew beneath the fuselage as Elaine fought to keep the bird straight. With no flaps, no brakes, and a failing stabilizer, it took everything she had to hold the line. The aircraft rolled to a stop near the end of the emergency strip. Steam rising from the engine bays, hydraulic fluid leaking across the concrete. For a moment, there was no movement, just the quiet hiss of cooling metal and a soft wind carrying dust across the runway. Then the canopy opened. Elaine Clitt climbed out slowly, helmet in hand, her flight suit torn and stained, one gloved hand gripping the side of the ladder like she might collapse at any second. But she didn't. She stood tall. Fire crews froze, medics hovered. No one knew what to say. She had no visible wounds, but everyone could see it on her face. She'd flown to the edge of death and back. Her eyes were raw with exhaustion, her breath shallow, but beneath it all was something else. Calm. The kind of calm that only comes when you've done the impossible. Her aircraft was roped off immediately, engineers already scanning the damage. The left engine had thrown a blade. The cannon's barrel was scorched from overheating. The stabilizer was barely hanging on. One mechanic stepped back, removed his headset, and muttered, "She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't have made it." But she had. The debrief was short, tense. Command was already reviewing satellite footage, trying to piece together what she had done. The tactical report read like fiction. Radar dodging, cannon bursts from below 100 feet, last-minute intercepts. The Chinook pilots submitted their logs, praising her intervention. The SEALs submitted nothing. They didn't need to. Their survival was the only statement.
Yet not everyone was impressed. The Pentagon liaison joined via encrypted feed, face unreadable, voice cold. He ignored multiple standing orders, broke protocol, risked critical assets. Colonel Harrow's jaw tensed, and saved 12 operators who would have died without her. I'm not disputing the result. I'm addressing the method. Elaine said nothing. She didn't need to. The data was there. Altitude logs, speed readings, system overrides. She had dropped to under 70 feet in live combat, flown blind through a radar shadow, and taken out 3 separate threats with a crippled aircraft. There was no training manual for what she had done.
No doctrine, just gut and precision. She turned that aircraft into something it was never meant to be, the liaison said. Maybe that's what we needed, Harrow muttered. Outside the chain of command, the story was already escaping. A helmet cam clip from a SEAL showing our A-10 roaring past like a ghost went viral within hours. A frame from the footage, her jet slicing between the cliffs, cannon firing, hit the internet with the caption, "This angel flies below radar." The public couldn't get enough. Forums lit up. News outlets ran features. Pilots whispered in mess halls. And in flight schools across the country, cadets began to refer to the impossible maneuver as the storm line. Elaine Kitt became a name they couldn't bury, no matter how quietly they filed the reports. She was too fast, too loud, too effective. They grounded her temporarily, pending review, pending evaluation, pending silence. But heroes don't stay grounded for long. 3 weeks later, her restriction was lifted, unofficially. Her name was added to an internal roster marked Advanced Tactical Instructors. A new program was launching, one that needed a different kind of teacher. She accepted the assignment on one condition: no simulators, real terrain, real pressure, real flying. They gave her a field unit, a training wing, and eventually a new squadron of pilots, many of whom had grown up hearing about Stormcaller before they even enlisted. She didn't teach them to break rules. She taught them to listen to the wind, to fly by feel, to know when altitude wasn't safety, it was distance, to trust that instinct wasn't recklessness, but refinement earned in fire. Years passed. The mission that made her legend became a case study. Quietly, without fanfare, the Air Force revised parts of its doctrine on low-altitude combat navigation. It was never officially called the Stormcaller method, but everyone knew what it meant. And somewhere in the Korangal Valley, there's still a scar across the cliff face, a place where one woman's aircraft passed so close it stripped bark from the trees and changed the direction of a war. The SEALs never forgot. Neither did the pilots, nor the ground crews who watched her Warthog limp home, wings shaking, but never broken. One day, during a lecture at the academy, a young cadet asked her, "Major Kitt, what made you fly so low that day?" She looked out the window for a long moment before answering, "They told me it couldn't be done, but I knew better. Sometimes, when no one else will dive into the fire, you have to become the storm." And she did.